years so far was when I did some hosting stuff at the Turner Classic Movies Festival in Los Angeles. And they put me up at the Roosevelt Hotel, and I walked outside and turned the corner and ran right into Anna Karenina, who's the star, you know, Godard's muse, Anna Karenina. She was, of course, what else was she doing but smoking a cigarette and hiding outside? Very French, still very, very French. This was fantastic. I got like 10 minutes with Anna Karenina with nobody around. It was absolutely fantastic. So go see that film by all means. That is Jean-Luc Godard's idea of a heist film. Different than most people's idea of a heist film, but well worth seeing. Okay, welcome back. Day 2 of this festival, and as those of you who were here last night heard in my introduction, we're doing something a little different this year. We're presenting the whole festival in chronological order, almost year by year. And with the emphasis being on showing legitimate A films from these years, accompanied by genuine B films. So you were having as close to the experience that audiences had in the 1940s, except there was no jackass like me who came out here and talked about the movies in the 1940s. They gave you dishes and stuff instead, and they had prizes. We'll get around to that during the week. There will be raffles and prizes and things during the week, but we're starting a little slow, okay? So if you were here last night and you saw I Wake Up Screaming, you realize that certain sections of that film, you could see the film noir movement coming to life. But other sections of the film were really odd. All the musical stuff and just the tone was very inconsistent. The film you're about to see was made the following year in 1942, and a lot of the same things apply. Last night's film was made at 20th Century Fox. Tonight's film is at Paramount, which would be a very, very significant studio in the development of film noir. A lot of people credit Paramount's Double Indemnity with being the film that sort of lit the fuse, that triggered the whole movement. But here we are 2 years before Double Indemnity was released, and as you'll see in this Gun for Hire, a lot of the significant elements of the film noir movement are in place in this movie, but studios still weren't ready to go whole hog. Let's just dive into the darkness. You still need musical numbers and comedy relief and all these things, even though it's the story of a paid assassin looking for revenge on his employer, right? So, yeah, light comedy always fits into that. The other thing that's worth noting about the way this series is structured is that the films we're seeing this weekend are all made during World War II. So the war is actually happening when all of these films were made. You are going to see a fairly significant shift in tone when the war ends. And it's fascinating to know that that tone gets darker. It gets darker and much grittier and more realistic once we win the war. So, a lot to consider in there. What's significant about this film, really above all else, is that it was the first pairing of Alan Ladd and Veronica Lake. It's kind of fascinating to realize that Alan Ladd is today almost a forgotten movie star. Even though he was Paramount's biggest male star in the 1940s, and the pairing of Alan Ladd and Veronica Lake, they were the hot couple of the 1940s. And it's interesting that Veronica Lake was sort of doing Lauren Bacall when Bacall was about 16 years old. Veronica Lake was already creating that persona. But for various personal reasons, it was something that was very hard for her to sustain. She didn't like being in the movie business. She had a horrible stage mother. The whole build-up of her as a star, the hair, the whole iconic look, she rebelled against it the whole way. And you'll hear me repeat this throughout the week. Sadly, you know, she had a very unhappy, unpleasant, and ultimately tragic life, as did Alan Ladd. But today, I'm not going to go into that, but today you're seeing them when the sparks first start flying. And also interesting to note, my wife always likes to point this out, how small movie stars are. Veronica Lake is barely, like she is barely breaking 5 feet tall. And Alan Ladd is actually not much taller. And movie actors of this era, you may not know this, but they were really small and they all had really big heads. It's true. I mean, I don't know what that is, but George Raft and Humphrey Bogart and John Garfield and the actresses too. I mean, it's just something about the way they photographed was exceptional. Okay, the other thing that's important about this movie, it's a bit of a confluence of very significant English writer, Graham Greene, who wrote the original novel upon which this is based. It was called This Gun for Sale. And Graham Greene was a man who wrote literary works and then wrote his entertainments that he considered to be of lesser significance than literary works. And This Gun for Sale is an example of that. A lot of people today would say that many of the entertainments actually have stood the test of time better than his literary works. But one of the people who is adapting this for the screen is a man named W.R. Burnett, who is one of the great American crime writers, but he's much more than that. He wrote the novel Little Caesar that was such a sensation in the 1930s and led to the wave of gangster pictures. He wrote High Sierra, which really was the film that made Humphrey Bogart a star. Again, another movie about outlaws pulling a robbery. And then he would go on to write The Asphalt Jungle and a number of very, very significant books. And to this day, I still think Burnett is a very underrated writer. We're actually, I'll be recording a thing for Criterion in this auditorium on Tuesday, talking about The Asphalt Jungle and Burnett's huge contribution to the movies. It was John Huston that taught him how to write a script, and for a while Burnett was one of the highest paid screenwriters along with Ben Heck in Hollywood, and his contribution to this movie is not to be underestimated. It's directed by Frank Tuttle, who was a card-carrying member of the Communist Party in the 1930s, which would come back to bite him severely not long after he made this film, because he would be one of the blacklisted, and his Hollywood career would kind of go down in flames in the late 1940s. He came back in as an art director and then got some directing jobs in the 1950s. Again, one of the great treats of this week will be you're going to be seeing some of the key figures in film noir appear multiple times. So last night when you saw I Wake Up Screaming, you got to see what was almost the debut of the great Larry Krieger. He's back. He's back again in this film. So you'll enjoy that. And I also want to point out very happily that this is one, if it's a film made at Paramount and they called for fabulous costume design, there was only one person that you could call for that, and that was the great Edith Head. And you are going to see some amazing costumes on Veronica Lake in this movie. And this festival, Edith Head is one of the people that we will be paying tribute to in this festival. And in fact, on Tuesday night, both movies are fantastic examples of Edith Head's work, Desert Fury and Sorry Wrong Number. And that will be a real treat that night because we will have Renee Patrick, which is actually the husband and wife team of Vince Keenan and Rosemary Keenan, who are here in Seattle. They live here in Seattle, who have written a novel called Designed for Dying, in which Edith Head is like the Nero Wolfe of Hollywood. Yes, Edith Head, crime solver. And I read the book and it's fantastic. And Vince and Rosemary will be here to co-host that evening and sign copies of the book. So it just keeps on giving. The gift that keeps on giving, film noir. So I'm very happy to see all of you. I love you folks that come up and talk to me and tell me where you've come from, the folks who came from Canada, people from all over the place. And I really appreciate how many of you have expressed your pleasure that Noir City is back here in Seattle, and we're not going away again. So don't worry. So enjoy this show and then come back and see the double bill, because that one is an incredible rarity that you only see in 35mm. It's a print that Universal kindly has loaned to us to show. So stick around for the B section and now enjoy This Gun for Hire. Thanks.